Welcome to our Leader as Coach Premier Coaching Panel discussion. Today's expert panel is being offered to give leaders and managers access to expert insights on leading with a coaching edge. Our panelists with me today are Michael Tucker, the Senior Partner at the Institute for Integrative Intelligence. Michael's a PCC level coach and an ICF certified executive and team coach. He's also a consultant, author, and speaker committed to the acceleration, advancement, and conscious evolution of our human family. I also have with me Dr. Kristen Truman-Allen. Dr. Kristen is a senior faculty at the Institute here. She's an executive coach, bringing her experience as executive leader, emergency nurse, outward bound expeditionary instructor, and organizational development professional into her coaching practice. She brings all of that. And I also have with me Odih Kumuyi. Love is a culture coach for leaders and teams where she bridges silos and ignites impact. She's a professor, conflict mediator, and former Ivy League dean and lawyer. As you can tell, we have this amazing, rich group of coaches with us. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for being here with me today for this really important topic. As I brought forward the title, Leader as Coach. So let's just dive right in. How are you defining coach-like leadership?
I'll jump in. I really think of leaders as influencing change through other people. So the coaching has an opportunity, a coach-like leader has an opportunity to empower and engage other people, really by evoking their wisdom, their style, their knowledge, their innovation, and their personal power into whatever the work is being done.
It's interesting because how I define it is very similar. It's for me, coach-like leaders create leaders. I mean, it's an integration of a number of different leadership competencies with a focus on coaching. But at the end of the day, it's really inviting everyone connected to this leader to access the leader within them. And it's done a fair amount through inquiry. And that's one of the powerful things about coaching. So very similar to your perspective, Dr. Kristen.
When I think of coach-like leadership, it takes me back to my first coaching experience as a professional and why that was incredibly beneficial. Having experienced leadership that was trying to replicate or trying to do a copy and paste of their style onto how I was showing up in a way that was not necessarily aligned to my voice, my values, my identity. And thinking of a coach like leader in any interaction that I'm having, I'm thinking about, well, what does the coachee need and what is my unique place as a leader to be able to lift that up, amplify that, and guide them in a way that honors the fact that they are resourced and talented and great. And I just see myself as someone who is a coach-like leader, someone who has the ability to exercise a bit of that restraint to just copy and paste themselves, to seeing themselves more so as a steward of someone's amazing talent and has the ability to do some refining work alongside them and allow them to really shine. So a coach-like leader has patience, has a lot of humility, has a lot of really core skill sets that I'm sure that we're all going to talk about, but it all comes back to the heart of remembering what that coach-like leadership is really centered on, and it's centered on the people that you're serving and less so on who you are and how amazing you already are. So those are the images that come to mind, and I always try to hold space for that whenever I'm with leaders.
I love that. And I mean, I'm just thinking, to me in this day and age with current challenges, how important some of these qualities and approaches can be. Curious, what do each of you see as, how can coach-like leadership really show up during current challenges or, just in general challenges?
Well, there are so many different ways. I mean, there really is so many ways. And I think that for the coach-like leader, it's going to be important for them to pay attention to what particular leadership quality they need to access at that moment. Maybe it is the coaching and it is tapping into that inquiry of their team, getting the wisdom of the team. Sometimes a coach-like leader may be directive, depending on what the situation is. It might not necessarily be time for getting everyone's feedback. Sometimes it's time to be directive. And then maybe other times, um, there's that consensus building and that team collaboration. So I think a strong coach-like leader in many ways is also a situational leader. This individual is paying attention to the environment, to the situation, and they're showing up in the way that the situation demands, and at the same time inviting those around them to tap into that wisdom within themselves. They don't need to take the whole thing on themselves.
Yeah, that situational leadership speaks to me a lot. I talk a lot about being an adaptive leader, and a lot of the research does show that while there are many leadership styles, the most adaptive, the most agile, the most situationally aware, who is able to lean into that context, because things change and sometimes they change so quickly. So I'm thinking of just like the ability to zoom in and out between the intimacy of a coaching moment, but also being able to read a larger organizational context and other factors that the leader may not necessarily have control over. And being mindful to coach. And as Michael shared, there might be a need to move with a sense of urgency, but there would have been sufficient trust built into the fiber of that relationship that those who are being directed, right, they trust that urgency. They trust that there probably is a little less space for the level of like maybe back and forth or developmental nurturing that might happen, and they trust the guidance of 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 the coach like leader. So I see there is a lot of benefits. And I mean, hopefully the message here is that people don't view a coach like leader as passive and just sort of like allowing everyone to do as they will. Because if we kind of transfer the language of coaching into any other space, sports, you name it, the coach is there as a supporter, as a cheerleader, but also as someone who's able to redirect appropriately. So those, yeah, that's really what I'm sitting with in terms of what we're seeing right now.
I love that. And I want to add the empowerment driven piece of that, or that elevation driven piece of that, that I think what you're also getting to is there's an opportunity for directness and directive, but there's also an opportunity to really get people to the top of their scope. So relying on them in the time of crisis or in a time of difficulty to nudge people beyond what they think is possible for themselves, so that they're really truly behaving at their top of scope, whatever that is. Maybe they haven't even defined it yet, but kind of pulling that out of them.
Yeah, I'm just really appreciating this conversation and all the different angles that being a coach like leader covers. And I'm also, one thing that I've observed is leaders can suffer from burnout. They're carrying such a weight on their shoulders often, that whole saying, it's lonely at the top, right? And one of the benefits that I've noticed is that adopting coach-like leadership approach and really honing that in, not just like Love was saying, not just duplicating, this is how I should be, but really tuning into the people that you work with, that that lightens the leader's load because the leader's engaging in new ways. So I'm just curious what other benefits each of you have seen in your experience with coach-like leadership.
One benefit that I can think of is whether that when coach-like leadership operates both at a one-on-one level and in a group situation, I think I mentioned this earlier, it begins to nurture seeds of trust. And when those seeds of trust are nurtured across in a relationship, across a group of people, then that ladders up to more so an ecosystem of psychological safety and connectedness. So a common picture that I see as I do psychological safety work with teams is sometimes people might say, well, we don't have psychological safety, but there are two people who have psychological safety with the leader. And I kind of have to pause and invite them to rethink that, because there is an environmental the state of the weather, right? Like, we don't experience the weather over our house only, right? Like, if there's rain in the neighborhood, it's raining in the neighborhood, right? We don't it doesn't rain over your house, snow over that house. So I think of that leader, if I were to think of the leader as nurturing an environment, then that coach-like leadership within a defined environment around a set of goals, around a set of cultural and values expectations, should be able to demonstrate that with maybe not equal measure, but a fair amount of measure to all those who are within that environment. So it shouldn't feel like some folks are getting special treatment and there is a sense of trust, which oftentimes gets interpreted as preferential treatment, where people might then say, oh, I noticed Michael gets more mentorship than Laurel, right? So that coach-like leadership is also able to self-assess the level of investment being poured into the environment where they're being situated. And in that sort of like equitable type of spread of nurturing and coaching, then that ladders up into a much more sustainable environment for a group of people. And a sort of like meta outcome that I then see out of that is that the nature of that relationship now begins to almost have a multiplier effect. So peers within that environment begin to coach each other. They begin to be more open to learning. They begin to raise their hands to be challenged, to reach that high tier of performance. So it should bring forth like that at an environmental level. It'll take time and it'll take work. But I think Michael said earlier, a great coach-like leader makes more leaders. And I think people begin to show up in that way when the work really embeds itself.
Yeah, and it sounds like it also can invite a coaching culture.
There we go.
Yeah, just hopping on the back of what you just shared around creating more leaders, that's probably one of the biggest benefits that I see with coach-like leaders. They are creating more leaders, which means that they create a very clear path of succession within the organization. One of the biggest challenges within organizations is it's succession. It's hey, I want to move up, but I have no one to take my place. And this taps directly into promotion opportunities for the current leader. And so if you're not developing a leader behind you or a group of leaders that could potentially take your spot, then it's going to be very, very difficult for you to move up within the organization. And it's also going to be difficult for the organization to achieve their mission long term. So that's a big benefit. And I would say the other big benefit that I see with leaders who embrace this style of leadership is a reduction in stress in a huge, huge way. I cannot tell you how many leaders think that just because they are the leader, they are responsible for doing it all.
Mm-hmm.
And that couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah, I was gonna kind of add into that too, in terms of that integrated balance. I see coach-like leaders have a really healthy way of seeing their wholeness and the wholeness of the team around them. So we hear people talk about, or maybe it's just even from a sustainability perspective. So they're healthier, they're well integrated, they're they'll last longer from a, whether you want to say work-life balance, all those parts and pieces of themselves that show up, it allows that to show up for everyone else also, and sets that as an expectation.
Yeah. So I'm hearing, so the positive focus on the possibility of the people that are working. Succession planning, Michael, you didn't use that word, but that's kind of,
That's it.
Yep. Coaching culture, and stress relief. Yeah, those are some pretty key benefits. And how about the qualities? What qualities do you see in coach-like leaders that help them to get to those benefits?
There's so many. I think it's like,
Ready to start.
Where do we start?
Where to
Yeah.
start? I want to lift up listening. And as someone who does work around conflict, and like, listening is just such an underutilized, underrated skill. Appears easy to do and probably really hard to do at such a deep level, right? And I think of listening two ways: the ability to listen to yourself and also deeply listen to others. I believe a coach-like leader is very much in tune with their inner world. And I think that's that level of readiness. Am I even ready to coach or have a coaching conversation? That is probably assumed, but more so being able to listen to respond rather than react, listening for what's not being said, as well as what's being said, and listening with an eye to an ear and heart to explore even deeply, or even deeper. So I think of maybe that sense of even asking why 7 times before you get to the real answer is the patience that comes with the ability to listen deeply. So those listening, I'll in my biased way, I'll rank that pretty high on the things that any leader should be doing, because we're moving so fast these days that we miss what's being said, or we just fill in the blanks. Like, it's like, do we actually understand what I'm saying? Like, slow down and let's go through that again. So being able to listen and really tune in can be so powerful.
I want to bring back something Love said earlier. I don't think I'll say it as divine, but the listening connected to being able to see what's going on in the whole organization, in addition to what's going on with the person in front of you, in addition to what's going on for me as the leader, and listening deeply on all of those levels, and that ability to, I mean, we can call it emotional intelligence, that self-awareness, that organizational awareness, relationship management, whatever those pieces are, but that that also links us to some ownership of what am I bringing that's contributing or not contributing, and listening to that at in a wisdom level also.
Tied into what you're saying there, Kristen, is this whole idea of presence. There's been this big move in leadership around developing leadership presence or executive presence. And when I think about that, a leader that owns this quality deeply understands how the energy that they're bringing into the room is impacting the whole room, and will ultimately impact the decisions that are made in that room, which could potentially ripple throughout the globe, depending on the position in which the leader sits in. So really being present to that, understanding the energy that's moving inside of them. Love, you talked about knowing what's going on inside of you first and foremost, but also how that's affecting other folks. Because I will tell you, I have seen people come from a place that's really, really, really not centered or aligned, and the results have been catastrophic. And on the other side of things, I've seen leaders who are aware of themselves. They know that in those difficult moments that they need to ground, they need to center. And so they bring that into the conversation, they bring that into the room. And as a result, it's as if the energy and the hearts of everyone's in the room harmonizes with that. And then they create from that space.
And I wonder if that connects back to the self-coaching piece. It can, right? If we can be present to the self as leader, what Love was saying. Yeah, we have a whole class on deep listening, holding space, presence, right? Those are core coaching skills. And even one thing that I've just thought was brilliant with coaching is the ability to learn how to tune into what's not said. That is so key for leadership.
Yeah,
And
that's a
if
superpower.
yeah, sorry, Michael, you were saying something?
No, I was just saying that that's a superpower.
Yeah, it really is. I think I don't know why the word like transactional and relational is coming to mind right now. I think with a leader's ability in listening to the organization, in listening to their own needs, it's human to feel some level of pressure to think about, okay, performance goals, maybe someone isn't pulling their weight in the way that they should. And there can be a lot of like anxiousness or just very like an energy of urgency coming into every conversation. And I think there's some deep and very real work for folks to be able to really balance how they are creating the space for and inviting curiosity at the right place at the right time, and also giving themselves grace to model if they miss the mark, right? I can imagine that there are times that a leader might want to coach like a leader, but kind of wants to be like, chop, chop, let's go. Like this thing needs to keep going. Like now it's not time for the slow-mo. Like we gotta be in that performance mode because I am feeling the heat from above and I'm trying to I don't know, like gentle parent in this moment and I'm it's not working out. So, being able to even use those moments to model that I too am a work in progress as a coach and like, hey, this is not my best day. This is not my best grandstanding performance. I'm really trying to show up for you. And I also want you to know that I understand that you won't be at your shiniest, like most modeled self at all times. So like using coaching to model and to being able to extend vulnerability and to hold space for grace. I think there are some things that can be coached and can sound very transactional. Like, okay, like you almost sound like a robot if you're like asking. You can ask all the questions and check everything down the list, and the person would be like, something is off here. Versus you could say, hey, I have my script of where things should be going today, and London Bridge is burning down. Like, can we just like keep it real for a moment? And I think in those moments, even the person can see that it's okay to show up human. It's okay to show up whole and just hold all the pieces of ourselves, whether the pieces that got this down to the theory or the pieces that are just not holding it together today. I mean, I know that's real for me, so that's you're gonna get what you're gonna get.
Yeah, that's pretty yummy. It's making me think too about the next those times when we're trying to be coach-like leader and we have a sense of urgency because we think we know. So as the leader who's been a leader for a long time, or maybe has gotten put into the place that they are as a leader because, or a manager, because they have an expertise in something and they're carrying the weight of like, I know. And so there's that urgency to get to where I am, to think like me. And so a coach-like leader has the presence of mind and the presence of self to pause and kind of manage that wiggly inside, to be curious, like you said, maybe there's something else here. And is it as urgent as I think it is? Yes, the bridge is burning down. That's urgent. And I do know, so let's be directive, going back to what Michael said. So we're not taking away that permission to be directive if necessary, or decisive, or knowing, but to understand where the sense of urgency is coming from and where there's an opportunity to invite some more wisdom.
Mhm.
Yeah, that brings to mind how, we can be, as leaders, we can be the expert of the vision or something outside of us. We can bring expertise to the table to benefit the team, to benefit the company, and we'll never be the expert of someone else's truth, someone else's delivery strategy, someone else's action plan, someone else's success formula. So that's where I see the coaching coming in so brilliantly. And even that's the stress relief piece. I don't have to know. I don't have to know how to motivate someone when I can coach them so that they become self-motivated. So how about, I would just love to hear more about results. What kind of results have you each seen come to life in the workplace because of coach-like leadership approaches?
Wow, I mean, so many. Where do we even begin to start with this? I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I'm thinking about very specific instances where I've worked with leaders, and I'm thinking about one right now that I'm working with. We talked about succession planning a little bit earlier. Um, it's amazing that this owner of this company brought me in to coach her, and then ultimately coach some of the leaders that are going to be taking her place, because she's doing what's called an ESOP, an employee stock option plan, where she's going to be selling the company to the employees. And so what I've noticed over this time of coaching these, I guess the second tier leaders right under her, what I'm noticing is how each of them is leveling up, how each of them is taking on new responsibilities. I'm working with a leader now. He's just launched a new division in the organization. One of their other leaders is really supporting their sales. And I'm just going back to October. I mean, the record October for the entire 50 some odd year history of this company, right? So it's leaders giving space for new leaders to emerge. That's the big result that I'm seeing with this particular example. And if we have time, I could share some more.
I'm thinking of some specific examples, like, yes, like you said, we could go on and on and on. Different than what Michael's saying, but because of what Michael is saying, I see engagement 100%. So a coach-like leader can lead their team to this level of engagement that drives without having the leader drive. So they're coming from a place of their why, they're coming from a place of driving change in actions, which ultimately decreases turnover, increases retention, like you've got less sick days, you've got people on fire because they're engaged, energized, connected to their purpose and each other. And because of that, they're getting results. And so the burnout goes down. There's a togetherness, even in a crisis. In fact, I would say that sometimes I can think of examples where I was the most engaged when the creative tension was high and there was some really big deliverables on the other end that would make or break the organization. So when it's coach-like, it changes the dynamic of how the whole organization gets results because of the culture.
Yeah, that brought a memory to mind. So I was gonna think of results through an individual, like a few individuals who have coached, and I'll say there's a version of themselves, the highest and best expressions of their confidence, their ability to really stand out and assert their gifts and contributions within the leadership. I mean, not just to those who report to them, but to those who they report into, and demonstrate that level of leadership. So they have become just a lot more confident and motivated to raise their hands and to show up and show out, right, with like what they have going, without feeling that sense of reservation or imposter syndrome. So there is a way that for the leader who is taking this coach-like stance, that also pours into them, because they are beginning to see the results of how they're showing up. So that's sort of like the leader themselves experiencing that transformation from doing coach-like work, leading like a coach. And then at a larger level, at an ecosystem level within an organization, I did a significant like leadership development work for a group of leaders, and they went through leadership development and, you know, doing all that amazing stuff. And the ones who really zoned in and did that work around their leadership development, what happened was, within maybe about 6 months after, the organization went through significant restructuring and change. And it was very clear that there was a direct line between those leaders who had done their work around leadership development and having that coaching culture, and those who were able to stabilize their teams amidst the organizational disruption. They were the ones who their engagement scores did not fall significantly, or at least stayed balanced, versus those who probably were not as engaged in that leadership process. So there was a very direct correlation that the coach-like leaders had teams amidst the disruption who were more stable, who experienced less negative impact of the stress of the organizational restructuring and disruption, and had just like a lot more, how might I describe, even for people who may have had to be separated, had just a, a more communal way of navigating that separation that needed to happen, not for performance sake, but as a natural course of the organization having to make those changes that was required. So it was very, very clear that, you know, Dr. Kristen used the example of sort of like swimming or synchronized swimming. You don't quite learn how to swim when the tide is high and a storm is coming in, right? So there's something to be said about being able to invest in developing and nurturing those skills, because when the tide is high and a storm comes in and our swimming isn't as elegant as it usually is, that's really when we know how to jump in and do the work. And I've really seen leaders who have these skills really show up at times of internal or external crisis.
You know, the one thing I would add to this, piggybacking on what you're saying, is what I'm seeing is a new relationship with difficult conversations. And these difficult conversations, the context, the frame of this whole idea is changed such that these are no longer difficult conversations. These are opportunities for growth and development, not only for the leader, but for, you know, whoever, you know, they're leading. And I've seen over the years, it's almost like there's been this gripping fear to have difficult conversations. Well, now when you're taking coaching on as a leadership competency, it's not a difficult conversation anymore. It is a conversation for growth. It is an opportunity to bring out the best version of that other individual, first and foremost by doing it within yourself. And what coaching teaches us is to acknowledge and to honor the wholeness and the resourcefulness of another human being. And that resource, acknowledging that often means that as a leader, I can influence how you feel, but I cannot be responsible for how you feel. I can't. So that means there might be things that I need to tell you. And because I'm owning my responsibility to tell you those things, I am divesting from being afraid that you might feel or see me negatively. And of course, this is assuming that this leader is taking a positive approach to having this kind of dialogue with a member of their team.
Really, really good points. All right, as we begin to wrap up, I'm curious, what message do each of you have for leaders that are looking to become more coach-like?
I
Go
would
ahead.
go with, it takes work and it takes time. And while there are some people who may have are intuitive helpers, allow yourself to move through possibly the discomfort of learning the skill itself. I oftentimes find that people, maybe someone might want to be trained or want to learn to be a coach-like leader. And there is sometimes a balance that you have to make between how supportive should I be versus how much should I hold, how much should there be accountability in this conversation, right? So finding the balances of who you are between support and accountability, or any of the other balances, and being okay with again, I'm very visual, but I'm just thinking of it as like riding a bicycle. It won't be natural on day one. But if you're motivated and enthusiastic enough, you'll get there. But don't relinquish or just sort of like set aside that it might take time, and it does take work to sharpen and nurture your skills. And even if it feels awkward, even if these are not the words that you might naturally use in everyday conversations, there is some real benefit to sharpening this ability. And not even if it doesn't make you feel like the expert, because I know for folks who might be thinking about this are probably have a high level of expertise in something else that gives them a great deal of comfort. So when they meet something that may not be their highest level of expertise, that the level of discomfort is even much more peaked. So allow that to, make it a friend. Make it a friend. Make discomfort and growth a friend.
I appreciate that. I always say the coaching skills are a short-term investment and what Love is saying, it's a little uncomfortable to learn them, but the other side, it eventually begins to flow. So I appreciate that one. Michael or Kristen?
Well, I love the fact that you're talking about learning these skills. And what I want to highlight is that it can be very easy to think that you are a great coach without intentionally putting yourself in an environment where you can learn these skills. And I will tell you 1,000%, with 1,000% certainty, the data says otherwise. You might think that you're a great coach, but I promise you, the data says, according to the folks that are experiencing your coaching, that's not the case. So invest in your own development. Take your pride, put it aside, and explore a new possibility for yourself. That's absolutely what I would say. And give yourself some grace and ease in this process. You don't have to be perfect at it, but there is effort that is required.
That was such a nice way to put that, Michael. The data says, what's he come with the data?
Oh, I have the data. Let me tell you, I have the data.
Well, I've even had people in our classes who have been coaching people as leaders, and they go through the class and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I wasn't coaching. I thought I was coaching. This is what I was doing. And there's if you've experienced being coached by someone, there's a feeling that there's this magic that happened. And what was that? Like it's that, and to realize that there are actually skills, and that once you have those skills, it is experienced as magic. But there are some, it's practicing, right? Just like anything else we would do in the gym, you're going to get results in a different way when you practice and do it all the time in a really focused, developed way. And then
Well,
you'll all experience magic.
yes. And one thing that I love is once you have the skills, you can't really go back to not having them. Like they're with you for the long haul. They're with you for a lifetime, which is really brilliant. And because they can show up in so many areas of our life to help amplify what we're up to. All right. So I'm going to, well, actually, here's my message. I got so excited from what you guys were sharing. My message that was really on my heart as we have been exploring this is leadership does not have to be as stressful. Leaders have a lot on their shoulders, and I always like to say success is math. You're only one or two formulas away from a completely different experience. And some of the coaching skills, not that they're formulaic, but they offer a formula to communicate differently, to self-coach differently. They offer us a pathway forward. So that's my 2 cents there. As we wrap up, I did want to share for those who are tuning in 5 steps to consider if you are in a position where you're like, I could use more coach-like leadership approaches in what I'm up to. So 5 steps to consider. Become educated in what we call the 3 C's. What is the difference between counseling somebody, also mentoring, consulting, giving advice, and actual coaching skills? So learn the distinctions. They can help you know, right now I need to engage this. Right now I don't need to engage that. So that can help you make those distinctions and discernments. You can also become trained and level 1 skills. So the ICF has identified level 1 training is perfect for anyone who isn't going to be coaching as their primary career, but they're just wanting to add the skills into what they're doing. So level 1 training has been designed exactly for leaders in your position. And within that process, step 3, receive mentoring. These coaches here with me today are powerful coaches and also mentors. So you receive mentoring as a part of the education. That way you can take the step 4, which is to apply the feedback in real time. See how it works. See what doesn't work. You can refine and tune in, really hone your coaching craft with step 4. And step 5 is my favorite. Enjoy. Once you're on the other side of the discomfort of learning something new, you now have lower stress approaches that will help you delegate and empower and connect and relate to the work that you're doing, and really help you step into that high impact leadership. So if that's helpful, those are the 5 steps that I recommend taking and looking at. Before we hop off, I just wanted to give a little bit of time to put you in touch with these amazing coaches. So how can people tuning in find your work in the world? Love, how about we start with you?
Sure. Thank you for having us here, Laurel, and thank you for hosting such an amazing conversation. I appreciate the space that you've created. So if you're not seeing me hopping around on Laurel's LinkedIn page, you'll also find me at unsiloed.org. So I lead a team of amazing coaches and consultants at unsiloed, unsiloed.org, and .org/leadership to see our leadership development program, which has a snippet on coaching as well. But as Laurel shared, to gain that skill and that competence level 1, I'm grateful to know that our leaders who want to learn more about coaching will be going to the Institute. So happy to to be in this conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah, for those folks looking to get a hold of me, you can find me, of course, at the Institute for Integrative Intelligence, hanging out with Laurel. You can also find me at tuckercoaching.net and on LinkedIn. And then in the very, very near future, in the coming months, you might find me in Riyadh. So I'll be in Saudi Arabia for the next year in the coming months here. So if you happen to be in that region of the world, definitely look me up. I'd be happy to connect with you.
Excellent.
So exciting for you, Michael.
Thank you.
So if you would like to connect with me other than with the Institute, you can find me at Pulp, P-U-L-P, think, the parts of a tree, the inside of an orange, the essence, pulpleadershipcoaching.com. You can find me there or on LinkedIn. Thank you, Laurel. And it was such an important topic. And so I'm delighted to have been part of this conversation.
Yeah. Me too. Thank you all. This was such a pleasure. So great to connect with you. And to our listeners, we hope that this was illuminating to whatever amazing work you're up to in the world. Thank you.